Hello. Welcome back, everyone. I want to start off today by talking about Matthew chapter 23. In this chapter, Jesus gives a lament against the scribes and the Pharisees. Though he is directly criticizing the scribes and the Pharisees in context of the Jewish tradition, this passage deeply resonated with me. It reminded me of the experiences I had with priests and preachers within my lifetime. And it thoroughly described the state that I believe the church is in today. With that said, I felt the need to rewrite the lament, replacing scribes and Pharisees with priests and preachers. Additionally, I replaced references to things of their time with modern equivalents. Any mention of old prophets I replaced with Jesus himself. And so I'm going to read it to you, but I want you to first pause the podcast and read the original Matthew 23 from the Bible so you have context on what I'm about to read to you, because it is indeed what they might call blasphemous. So, the 7 woes of the priests and preachers. The priests and preachers speak holy words, so do and observe what they tell you, but not what they do. For they preach, but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to move such burdens, let alone touch them with a finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their Bibles big and crosses long, and they love the place of honor and feasts, and the best seats in the churches, and greetings in the stores and coffee shops, and being called Father by others. Call no man Father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. You are not to be called teacher or instructor either, for we are all brothers and sisters, and we have only one instructor, the Christ. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever brings themselves higher will be humbled, and whoever humbles themselves will be brought higher. But woe to you, priests and preachers, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. For you neither enter yourselves, nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, priests and preachers, hypocrites, for you travel across sea and land to make a single convert. And when they become a convert, you make them twice a follower of Satan as yourself. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the church, it is nothing. But if they swear to the priest in the church, they are bound by oath. You blind fools! For which is greater, the priest or the church that made the priest sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by love, it is nothing. But if they swear by Jesus' sacrifice out of love, they are bound by oath. You blind men! For which is greater, the sacrifice or the love that made the sacrifice sacred? So whoever swears by the church swears by it and by they who dwell in it. And whoever swears by love swears by it and Jesus who died in its name. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it. Woe to you, priests and preachers, hypocrites! For you wear your crosses and refuse your wine, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, priests and preachers, hypocrites! For you shower your bodies and comb your hair, leaving the greed and self-indulgence in. You blind teachers, first clean what's within, and the outside will clean itself. Woe to you, priests and preachers, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed gravestones, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of a dead man's rotting flesh and decaying bones. So also you outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy, lies, and lawlessness. Woe to you, priests and preachers, hypocrites! For you build and decorate the temples and churches of Jesus, and flaunt your crosses, saying, if we lived in the time of Jesus, we wouldn't have stoned him and assisted in his crucifixion. Thus you witness against yourselves that you are the sons of those who casted the first stone, and the man who nailed him to the cross. Fill up, then, the measure of your fathers. You serpents, you spawn of demons, how are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I should send you prophets and wise men and philosophers, some of whom you will kill and crucify, some you will condemn in your churches and persecute from town to town, so that you may come all the righteous bloodshed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Jesus Christ, whom you murdered on the cross. Truly, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. O churches, where they kill the prophets and stone those who are sent to them. How often would I have gathered your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. But these words you shall say many times. When will you mean it? Today, priests and preachers hold their congregations in warehouses and auditoriums, stadiums and outlet malls, garages and just plain old buildings. They're ugly, right? There was a time when churches were beautiful. There was a craft to it, right? But now people just hold them in wherever, right? And they get rich off church donations. They do wicked things behind closed doors. They emphasize hell over heaven. In many regards, I believe the behavior of modern priests and preachers is largely responsible for the atheist boom of the late 20th century. Now, last Christmas, my fiance and I went to a local church congregation. It is one of the largest in town, and the setup is akin to a movie theater or an auditorium. You walk in and people give you free coffee, then you go and sit down in these movie theater type seats. There was a stage there with 2 large screens on the top left and right corners. And when the pastor came out, he did a quick prayer, then said, "Let's worship," or something of the sort. At that moment, the band came out and they started playing some kind of Christian rock music. The room went dark and there were strobe lights that moved in sync with the music. It was basically like a concert, right? And if this was worship, I wasn't really sure if we were worshiping God or if we were worshiping some kind of like rock and roll star, right? Like rock and roll Jesus. After this, they called all their children to the stage and they began reading this children's book. I forget the name, but it was about Jesus, obviously, right? Because it was Christmas. And the book described humanity as sick or condemned with sin because Eve disobeyed God. It said that in order to cleanse us of sin, we must accept Jesus into our hearts. And I sat there and I was horrified that these things were being taught to children, because these were concepts that no child could possibly understand. And the entire setup was to frighten children into believing in Jesus. And for a child, this is like telling them there's some kind of terrible monster lurking in the shadows. But if only you embrace this person they don't know, this person they've never even thought of before, this imaginary person in a book, if they embrace that person, then they'll be protected from the monster. It reminded me of a time when I went to a friend's birthday party in high school. Her father was the pastor of a church in a strip mall, and she decided to have her birthday party there. At the end of the party, her dad gave this sermon about Jonah being swallowed up by a whale. There was a point in the sermon where his face, it went all red, and he's just saying, "I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to save you from the flames of hell. You must accept Jesus or you will go into the flames of hell." And it was like this whole theatrical, fully fledged like performance that he was giving us, trying to like straight up just frighten us, make us afraid of hell, threaten us with hell. unless we just follow Jesus, right? Now, returning to last Christmas, after the reading of the children's book, the pastor there, he gave a very similar sermon centered around the idea of Emmanuel, and that this means God with us. This is a reference to Matthew chapter 1, verse 23, where it's written, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which is itself a reference to a prophecy in the book of Isaiah. Now, the sermon, it started off nice, right? God is with us. This is great. That this is something that I think about a lot. It's like if you're thinking of the mystics, they think, God is with us. They want to seek union with God, right? Now, he described the glory of God and how it is written throughout the Bible that he is always and will always be with us. But there's always a but, right? He more or less said, in order for God to be with you, you must accept Jesus into your heart. Now, what I've always felt is this, that the power of the priests is that they frame Jesus as the key to the kingdom of heaven, and only they can grant access to that key. But Jesus himself says, quote, "Being asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come, he answered them, 'The kingdom of God is not coming in ways that can be observed, nor will they say, look, here it is, or there, for behold, the kingdom of God is in the midst of you.'" This is from Luke chapter 17. Now, I'll get into this more in the next episode, but I'm reminded here of the beginning of John. That is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word is a translation from the Greek word logos, which is also translated to be meaning. So, we could say it another way, right? In the beginning was meaning, and meaning was with God, and meaning was God. Now, Jesus, according to John, is the Logos. He is the Word. He is the meaning. And no pun intended, but this has a double meaning. On one hand, we imagine meaning as the underlying explanation or why behind something less complex. A word, for instance, represents something in reality that is far more complex than a few letters on a screen. Jesus acts as the representation of God on earth. He is the meaning. Likewise, all of Jesus' sermons speak of how one can find and cultivate meaning in their lives. His life is dedicated to finding meaning and helping others find it as well. Meaning is universal and accessible to all people in all walks of life at any given moment. It is in the midst of you already. No man can hold your keys ransom, for there exists no door nor keys at all, only a threshold by which you may walk through at any given moment. All this to say, there's a reason priests and preachers like the one at the Christmas sermon, or like the one at that girl's birthday party, who hold meaning ransom and threaten you with the flames of hell. There's a reason they're so repulsive by so many people, or why so many people find them repulsive. It got to the point where in my high school years, I would drive by a church and imagine myself bursting into flames. When I saw a priest or a preacher, I would think of them like a member of God's secret police, ready to find me and condemn me to hell. The image of Christianity they put in my head was one ruled over by a totalitarian dictator of reality. This dictator had one rule: worship me or suffer eternity in hell. So not only did I have to follow all your rules, but I also had to believe and think about reality in a very specific way. It sounded like something written up by George Orwell or Aldous Huxley. Even our thoughts weren't safe from this totalitarian regime. God at this time in my life was not a word that meant wonder, love, and beauty, but rather hatred and hellfire. And so I was an angry atheist for many years, and my idea of what God could be, and more importantly, what he could represent, it it didn't exist. What God could be didn't exist for me. It was just God was this imaginary man in the sky who was used to control people in this cult called Christianity. That's what I thought God was in that time. And it wasn't until my college years where I learned what God could be. I learned what God could represent. I learned that this book wasn't a book of facts. It was a book of metaphors, of story, of meaning, right? Of the logos, of the word, of meaning. It was a book of meaning, not history, not facts, but wisdom, right? And then God became a concept that was so much greater than what I thought of it back then. And honestly, what I think a lot of these priests and preachers almost want you to think, right? Now, there's another lament that paints a picture of the state we're in today. It's from the Hermetic text. The Egyptian god Thoth gives a prophecy. Now, I'll paraphrase it, but he says that the world we live in is a reflection of the cosmos. That what exists in heaven is seen here on this earth, like as above, so below, right? The gods, the heavens, the cosmos, they live amongst us. God with us. Emmanuel, right? Yet there will come a time when man has lost his ability to worship the gods, to feel the heavens, and to see the cosmos. What is vile will be seen as virtue. What is fake will be seen as real. What is evil will be seen as good. Mankind will no longer pursue mystery, for they will be entirely devoted to a material pursuit and a material type of pleasure. Fools will be seen as wise men and saints, while the true wise men and saints will be persecuted. Society will crumble and the earth will be sickened by humanity's ignorance. So the gods will wash away the world with floods, destroying all the wickedness and irreverence of the world. What will be left is a people who see again, as if with new eyes, the gods, the heavens, and the cosmos. The YouTube channel After School did a really good presentation of this, using a speech read by Graham Hancock. Now, the world we live in is so materialistic that even the religions of today describe their religions in material terms. Again, everything is literal. Meaning pertains only to the facts of things. Theists and atheists debate about what really happened, about the history of religions. God is described as a man who lives in an unreachable, fantasy-like reality. And the list goes on. Yet, the purpose of religion and spiritual paths is not to explain physics or history, or to tell us why the sky is blue and why water is wet. Religion and spirituality exist to show us how to be in the world, to show us how to live. You can say that Harry Potter is just a silly story about wizards, or you could see the epic tale of love prevailing over evil, power, and death. Metaphor and meaning transcend facts and description, something that I'm really trying to just basically reinforce throughout this entire series. We live in a time where all people see of the world is facts and description. The whole world is reduced to statistics and surface-level understanding of reality. Messages in movies are no longer shown indirectly, but spelled out for the audience. Even modern philosophy is centered around the use of formal logic, which must formally define all things. Everything is put in boxes, and so no one thinks outside of the box. The thing is, the world cannot fit in a box. Our ability to understand an infinite universe depends on our willingness to abandon finite answers. When I learned this, I became less interested in science and history and more interested in philosophy and meaning. I stopped asking how life came to be, but rather why I choose to live in the first place. To quote Camus, "There's but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. If we cannot answer why we live, then why even try to answer any other kind of question?" Now, the entire story of the Gospels centers around Jesus being punished for teaching people about how to access the kingdom of heaven, by telling them that it is already here. He criticizes the scribes and Pharisees for infecting the temple with wickedness and for holding ransom the keys to heaven. With that said, I cannot help but to read Matthew 23 and see Jesus critiquing the modern day. I see his lament and the prophecy of Thoth playing out in real time. If Jesus came today, he would threaten the power of the entire church, teaching that God is with us, but there is no barrier for entry. Not the doors of a church nor the acceptance of a priest will send you to heaven, for it is already in our midst. After chapter 23, Jesus gives a similar prophecy that Thoth gave in Hermetica. Quote, "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold, but the one who enters to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." Then it continues, and this is long, so bear with me. "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. So, if they say to you, 'Look, he is in the wilderness,' do not go out. If they say, 'Look, he is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels, and a loud trumpet will call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." End quote. Now, a lot of prophecies from this time period were said to more so describe what was currently happening. The end times that Jesus speaks of is the end times of Jerusalem. But I want to focus on the way he presents this. He compares the coming of Christ to lightning, which comes from the east and shines as far as the west. He says that he will come on the clouds of heaven and send out angels with loud trumpet calls. He tells them not to trust those who say Christ is here or Christ is there, for they're wrong. What he's trying to do with the comparison to lightning and the prophecy of the angels with trumpets is to tell us that when he comes, it'll be obvious. It will be impossible to doubt his coming when he comes. Christ in this context is meaning. It's enlightenment, or the witnessing of wonder, purpose, or God. That is, Christ is not a person. It does not exist in a physical location, and it does not live in a physical body. Because remember, Jesus' kingdom is not of this world. So if Christ returns, he comes from the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom which exists within us. That's amongst us, right? This, again, is why Jesus was seen as so dangerous. If all people have access to the kingdom of heaven at any given moment, if all people are forgiven of their sins, then what power do the scribes and Pharisees have? So as we move to chapter 26, Jesus foretells his death, and we learn of the plot to kill him. We also learn that Judas Iscariot, one of his 12 disciples, has agreed to turn Jesus in. Matthew says this is purely for money, but other gospels say it is because the devil entered into him. The story of Judas is heavily contested and debated for its moral implications. Either way, he is one of the most critical characters in the narrative. He must betray Jesus, or the crucifixion and the resurrection never happen. Jesus also seems to know that it is Judas who will betray him. As a matter of fact, at the Last Supper, Jesus says that one of them will betray him. When Judas asks, "Is it I, Rabbi?" Jesus replies, "You have said so." The rest of the Last Supper passage reads as follows. Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took a cup. When he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." There's many ways to interpret this. For most Christians, this is a literal event, and it's practiced in what's called the Eucharist. It's a ritual where churchgoers eat bread and drink wine or grape juice to symbolize the Last Supper. The idea is that Christ will be with you if you eat his flesh and blood. As such, the Eucharist works well as a form of symbolic representation, right? When Jesus is at the Last Supper, he is reminding them that he will always be with them despite his coming death. He is telling them to remember him, to remember his message every time they eat, every time that they drink. That his lesson is fundamentally about life, about nourishing your life. That man cannot live off bread alone. So the bread that Jesus offers here is not that which fills our stomach, but that which fills our heart. And another thing that this represents is that he's about to give up his life for them and for humanity in a way. It's a symbolic representation of him giving up his flesh, him giving up his blood for something greater, right? For something greater than what just food could offer you, right? For the hearts of all of humanity. And we'll get into that in the next episode. Thank you for listening.